Amendments proposed by the Anti-Federalists. Amendments proposed by the Anti-Federalists. Amendments proposed by the Massachusetts Convention, February 7th, 1788. February 7th, 1788. As it is the opinion of this convention that certain amendments and alterations in the said Constitution would remove the fears and quiet the apprehensions of many of the good people of this Commonwealth, and more effectually guard against an undue administration of the federal government, the convention do therefore recommend that the following alterations and provisions be introduced into the said Constitution. First, that it be explicitly declared that all powers not expressly delegated by the aforesaid Constitution are reserved to the several states to be by them exercised. So explicitly, well, that's the 10th Amendment. All powers not granted to the U.S. government is granted to the states. Secondly, that there shall be one representative to every 30,000 persons according to the census mentioned in the Constitution, until the whole number of representatives amounts to 200. Thirdly, that Congress do not exercise the powers vested in them by the 4th section of the 1st article, but in cases when a state shall neglect or refuse to make the regulations therein mentioned, or shall make regulations subversive of the rights of the people to a free and equal representation in Congress agreeably to the Constitution. Fourthly, that Congress do not lay direct taxes, but when the monies arising from the impost and excise are insufficient for the public exigencies, nor then until Congress shall have first made a requisition upon the states to assess levy and pay their respective proportions of such requisition agreeably to the census fixed in the said Constitution, but in such way and manner as the legislature of the states shall think best. And in such case, if any state shall neglect or refuse to pay its proportion pursuant to such requisition, then Congress may assess and levy such states proportion together with interest thereon at the rate of 6% per annum from the time of payment prescribed in such requisition. Fifthly, that Congress erect no company of merchants with exclusive advantages of commerce. Sixthly, that no person shall be tried for any crime by which he may incur an infamous punishment or loss of life until he be first indicted by a grand jury, except in such cases as may arise in the government and regulation of the land and naval forces. Seventhly, the Supreme Judicial Federal Court shall have no jurisdiction of causes between citizens of different states unless the matter in dispute, whether it concerns the realty or personality, be of the value of $3,000 at the least, nor shall the federal judicial powers extend to any actions between citizens of different states where the matter in dispute, whether it concerns the realty or personality, is not of the value of $1,500 at the least. Eighthly, in civil actions between citizens of different states, every issue of fact arising in actions at common law shall be tried by a jury if the parties or either of them request it. Ninthly, Congress shall at no time consent that any person holding an office of trust or profit under the United States shall accept of a title of nobility or any other title or office from any king, prince, or foreign state. And the convention do in the name and in behalf of the people of this Commonwealth enjoin it upon their representatives in Congress at all times until the alterations and provisions aforesaid have been considered agreeably to the 5th article of the said Constitution, to exert all their influence and use all reasonable and legal methods to obtain a ratification of the said alterations and provisions in such manner as is provided in the said article. So that was a lot of fun. Amendments proposed by the Massachusetts Constitution, February 7th, 1788. That's the year. You got to get it. I mean, there wasn't many articles in January and February, but they're all written in May, June, July, August when it actually got written. But we're laying the groundwork here. The Massachusetts Convention is sitting there saying that, The federal government doesn't get all the powers. You got to reserve to the states. You got to reserve powers to the states. That's going to be the 10th Amendment. The second, they're talking about one representative to every 30,000 persons according to the census. And then they capped it at 200. So I'm not even for sure. It almost seems like it's one representative per 500,000 people, not even one per 30,000. Something crazy like that. I mean, it's not capped at 200. We got, 435, right? So 435 plus 100, so 535. I forget the exact number, but, let's just assume it's 1,000 motherfuckers. So if we have 1,000 motherfuckers in D.C., there's 330 million Americans, right? So that means that's 330,000. One representative represents 330,000 people. So that's not even close to one in every 30,000. That's goddamn fucking 11 times off. One person for every 330,000. So 330,000 people are going to go to one person and say, hey, this is what we want. And the person's like, oh, okay, I'm going to do that. Congress not exercise the power. Let's see, 4th section, 1st article, regulations, direct taxes, company of merchants. This, no person shall be tried for any crime by which he may incur an infamous punishment or loss of life until he be first indicted by a grand jury. You can't try somebody for a felony unless they've been indicted by a grand jury. I mean, you're going to throw somebody away for a fucking felony? What evidence do you have? Well, that guy said so. Did he see it? He didn't see any of it, but he's got 4 other guys that's got his back, and they say that he's a good guy. Okay, that's not evidence. You can pick their side, but they have no evidence, and they didn't see nothing. And the original complainant wrote his goddamn complaint in fucking Crown. I mean, I told one, told another, wrote it down, said it out loud, did a dance, fucking did a jitterbug. I mean, how many? I did the Charleston. Did the jitterbug in the Charleston. I mean, how many other dances do I gotta do out here before I get my freedom? Supreme Court. Let's see. Civil actions. Congress. Let's read this first little paragraph here. As the debate over the new Constitution progressed, anti-federalist objections to the powers granted the federal government began to crystallize in specific proposals for amendments that would limit those powers in some state conventions, especially where sentiment was closely divided. Proposals were made for amendments to be insisted upon prior to ratification, while others were offered in hopes that a second convention might consider them for inclusion in a revised constitution. The Massachusetts Convention, which narrowly ratified the Constitution in February 1788. Wow, so they went ahead and ratified the Constitution in spite of them wanting nine additional rights. Proposed a relatively short list of amendments, while Virginia in June of 1788 put forth a much longer list, in large measure duplicated by the North Carolina and New York conventions later in the year. So Massachusetts started a fucking nice little tradition there that's going to be copied by Virginia, North Carolina, and New York. Some of the proposals were similar to those later included in the Federal Bill of Rights. Thus were matters largely agreed to by both sides, while other amendments would have greatly altered the powers of the new government. The proposals, widely reprinted and circulated in 1788, are reprinted here from Documentary History of the Constitution, DC 1894, page 93 to 96, A further, even more radical list of amendments was proposed by a Rhode Island convention on March 6, 1790, before that state ratified the Constitution. Some of these proposed amendments are reprinted here from an original broadside at the John Carter Brown Library, with the kind permission of the library. So that was February 7th. So we're going to have to just cut it off on February 7th. But he mentioned something about March 6th. Rhode Island said some shit on March 6th. Yep. So we got that one coming up shortly. The most important amendments proposed by the Rhode Island Convention were the following 7. Oh, they're the most important, says this author. They start at number 3. That the powers of government may be reassumed by the people whensoever it shall be necessary to their happiness. What are you talking about, Rhode Island? God damn it, with your freedoms and rights and whatnot, liberty. You think this government was formed for the general welfare? You think this government was formed for the common defense? You think we formed the American government in order to protect our civil liberties? God damn. You have no idea.